He said that in January, and the catastrophe is here. That's what is making Venezuela so newsworthy lately. I think essentially what happened is that President Hugo Chavez used a period of high oil prices not to put some money aside, but to quintuple the foreign debt. So then the year of his election, when the price of oil was at 100, he was spending as if the price of oil was at 200, running a huge deficit. So then markets stopped lending to the country, so they could no longer afford to be spending as if the price of oil was at 200 and borrow the difference. And now the price of oil is at 40 or so for the Venezuelan crude.
Okay, let's Paras come in there and respond to some of that.
Inflation.
I think that mainly the problem is that you have been predicting that catastrophe for 17 years. I mean, when the government in Venezuela was doing well, they were already predicting a catastrophe. When I think there's a lot of ideological points of view in there. You're mixing, the President Chavez's term with the actual situation of Venezuela. You're saying that the debt was quintupled while you don't mention the fact that the GDP of the country was multiplied by 3. The country is not over-indebted. The GDP to debt ratio is lower than in many developed countries. It's not a problem of amount of debt. It's a problem of management of that debt. I mean, Venezuela has issues with accessing.
Before I bring Ricardo back in, let me ask you to answer the same question I asked him. What is behind this current crisis? Surely you would accept there is a crisis right now in Venezuela. Of course. So what's caused it?
Unlike Ricardo Hausmann, I live in Caracas, so of course there's no issue about that. There has been a sharp fall in oil prices, and there has been, I would say, a management of that crisis that has been deficient, to my opinion. But linking, this ideological idea that the left in Venezuela is not viable, that the Chavista project has failed, while it managed to secure at least 10 years of GDP growth, managed to secure the reduction of 49% in inequalities and in poverty. I mean, globally, the Chavista project is a success in Venezuela that is going through very, very tough times today.
Okay. Are you saying that the entire project is a failure because of the current catastrophe, despite all the gains that Temir outlines?
I mean, Temir is entitled to his own opinions. He's not entitled to his own facts. He said that the debt of Venezuela is not very big. Venezuela has a public foreign debt of $150 billion. $150 billion. Venezuela exports about $25 billion, maybe $30 billion. So the foreign debt is 6 years of exports. That is a huge debt. That is one of the biggest debts in the world. That is the reason why financial markets don't want to lend to Venezuela anymore. And that's the reason why Venezuela needs to restructure its debt and seek financial assistance. But this government has decided that they don't want to go there.
Exactly
they would rather default on the Venezuelan
Venezuela should go to the IMF. I mean, is the old neoliberal recipe the only thing we have to give to the Venezuelan people?
Well, I mean, you can give starvation and hunger and inflation and so on. I mean, look at what you've done.
The foreign news reports right now of Venezuela tend to paint quite harrowing scenes of food shortages, food riots, Venezuelans without medicine. Is that inaccurate?
There is a crisis. There is an economic crisis in Venezuela. What is inaccurate is to depict Venezuela as Ethiopia when it run food shortages. The problem in Venezuela is not the lack of food, it's not the lack of supply. I live in Venezuela and they eat. It's a problem of pricing. I mean, inflation is very high, and it's very hard for people.
It's going to hit 700% according to some studies.
How do you know that? Where does that figure? Yeah. Professor Hausmann keeps saying that there are no official figures, and he's probably right.
What do you think the inflation rate is?
No, it's very high, but
what is it?
Why?
If it's not 700,
I don't have a crystal ball.
You're saying it's not 700.
It's absolutely. I mean,
it's going to hit
absolutely
700
inaccurate to predict.
Okay, let me ask Ricardo Hausmann this question.
Like
you were obviously you were a minister of planning back in the early 90s in one of the predecessor governments prior to Chavez coming to power, and that government took IMF money, did structural reforms. I think they liberalised petrol prices. People took to the streets. They were shot at. They were killed. Hundreds were killed.